You've been painting all day and you're really quite pleased with what you've done. And you think, oh, yep, I'll pop that into a frame. That'll look really good. But then you look at your painting and either it's bowed or even worse, it's like corrugated paper. And you're thinking, that's going to look a right mess because I'll put a mound round it and there'll be gaps all over the place. What do I do? Well, there will be people currently shouting at this film saying, well, you should have stretched it in the first place. But I just think life is too short for stretching watercolour paper. So there are a couple of ways of flattening that sheet out. One's a little harsher and one's a little slower, so the choice is yours. My name's Liz Chadderton. I'm a professional artist based in Berkshire, and every week I bring you a tip or trick that I wish I'd known about ages ago. This week it's how to flatten out a buckled watercolour painting. It can be super annoying after you've painted something and you think, oh, I'll pop that into a frame, and you realise that your watercolour paper isn't flat. It's cockled because of the amount of water you've put on it. Really annoying, and you know that if you put that under a mount it's going to look a mess. Cockling happens when the different fibres in your paper absorb more or less water. So you're putting water on the front and those fibres expand, and then when they dry they contract, and the ones on the back have less water and they all expand and contract at different rates, and you get this cockling effect. You might notice it more with cellulose paper. This is cellulose paper. You will notice it more with lightweight paper. And the more water you use, the more cockling you'll get, and it will be a lot more obvious on a big sheet of paper. These are only little, I think about 1/8 of a sheet of watercolour paper, but even so, they're not very even, and I need to do something about them. If this had been a full sheet of watercolour paper, it would have been, like the Alps, I reckon. This is £140, and anything lighter than this, really you need to be stretching it to keep it flat. But I think life is too short to stretch watercolour paper. And also when you're stretching watercolour paper, you're ending up washing off half the sizing, which is what controls the absorbency of the paper. And you've paid a lot of money for that sizing. But there are two ways in which I can flatten things out. There's the faster, slightly harsher route, or the slower, slightly gentler route, and I'll show you both of those. Let's go for the harsh route first, and that involves an iron. So you need to protect your surface, and this is just an old tea towel. You could use something like a pillow slip or an old sheet, and then you put your painting face down. What you need to do is spray the back of your painting, and do be careful not to get any water on the front surface, and you're aiming for an even and not soaking surface. So I am just evening out that water. I think I'm a little dry down on these edges, so I'm just going to add a little in there. And then you need an iron. You need to protect your surface again, and then literally you iron your watercolour. So iron it both ways, acrosswards, upwards and diagonal, and that will slightly force the water into the back, and then you're drying off those fibres with your iron and ironing them flat. However, if we left it to cool down like that, it would start to buckle all over again. So I'm just going to sandwich it between paper and then put really heavy weights on top of it. Good use for all your art books. Beautiful book by Jackie Morris. Heavy weights if you want, and just flatten it down. Let it get to room temperature. We should have a nice flat painting. The second way of flattening your painting out, and again, just to show you, it's not too bad because it's only a little piece of paper. The second way isn't quite as vicious as ironing it, so if you are rather concerned about damaging your paper by ironing your painting, you might prefer this method. It just takes a bit longer. So again, put it face down and we do exactly the same. Spray with clean water, or you could use a damp sponge. We're not trying to get it sopping wet, we're trying to get it even and damp. And again, I'm just going to even out that water. I'm then going to sandwich it between some clean bits of paper. I'm using some brown paper here, and put it on a flat surface. I then need to weight it down, making sure that particularly the first layer is bigger than the painting, so that it's a really even weight all over it. Cookery books are great, your art books are great. I've got my collection of bugs and creatures. That's nice and heavy. Oh, this is a lovely book by Mark Adlington. Yes, Mark Adlington. We now need to leave that stack in place, I would say, for at least 5 or 6 hours. Potentially overnight is probably the easiest. And then we can get the painting out and it should be beautifully flat and dry. So don't be tempted to sandwich your damp painting between, say, 2 pieces of glass, because you'll get no evaporation and it won't dry. If you're concerned that your painting is going to stick, the inside packet from Cereal is the best non-stick paper I've found. And say you've used your watercolour very thick and you are concerned that it's going to stick, you could always put a sheet of this down and put to cover your painting. Obviously you would not use this if you were ironing it. Do go careful because it would just melt. But if after you've ironed it or after you've wet it, if you're going for the longer method, that can be really good non-stick. Just open out the inner packet. You're going to have to imagine a clock ticking just to show that time has passed. So this is the one that we ironed, and you can see that's lovely and flat, and that'll go in a mount really nicely. This is the one that we've left overnight, and you can see if I hold it that way that it's all flat, so it's super easy to sort out any buckling or cockling.